So do you rewatch any of these?
I watched your recording yesterday, and yeah, it was pretty moving.
I don't remember it. Yeah, they're all moving
Um,
though. That's true. Yeah,
yeah, Scott and with his opening, and Helena, I think.
stuff
Yeah,
resonates with you.
it's a beautiful. It's just absolutely beautiful. So it's just beautiful.
So what's your current uh, frequency of being triggered these days? The last couple of days.
A friend of mine asked me what my plans were for, let's say, January, and I realized I had no plans. I had a couple of big things that I had considered doing, but it just doesn't feel right for me. But the thought of having no plans and not being able to think of any plans kind of left me. Um, I still
With
feel it. It's,
self-judgment.
yeah, it's like um, without direction. It's like a sailboat that's
Yeah,
caught in the wind without a captain. Yeah, I, it's the strangest feeling to not be able to nail down something,
mm,
and realizing that, it seems like everything I plan these days, it just never goes that way. And people in my life are saying, "Oh, you change your mind again." And honestly, it's embarrassing
right.
because it's here I am retired. I have no plans. I have seemingly no sense of direction. I have just no control
Yeah, yeah. So you
over
might as well,
anything.
yeah, you might as well shoot yourself. There's no hope for you. Got, you don't comply with one of society's rules about that stuff.
It feels very, very, part of me feels very out of control.
Mm,
But the other part is, it's the other part is like, but, but why? I think
mm,
if someone put a gun to my head right now and said, "What's your plan?" I still could come up with anything.
mm.
So
Yeah,
it's
it
uncomfortable to me.
this might be of value to you. I don't know. Um, I declare myself a weirdo when situations like that come up. Right? I'll go, oh, plans. Am I supposed to have plans? Well, there must be something weird about me because I haven't. I'm sorry. That you people in your life don't want you to change. They're going to actually unconsciously, without realizing it, they're going to pressure you to stay the same, to be the way
Yeah,
they know you to be.
yeah,
And that pressure is tangible sometimes, depending, of course, on the people. So I don't know whether it's more the case with family or less the case with family, but essentially they want to know that they know you, and that the idea of you changing without them realizing doesn't sit well with them. So they're not going to want that. So without realizing it, they're gonna tell you that because you've got no plans, that there's something wrong with you, that you should have plans, and they should be significant. They should be acceptable to other people, what those plans are. How are you going to spend your time? Are you going to have a holiday? Where are you going to go? All this kind of stuff. So important to them.
Yeah, but what I again, it's picked up from my old patterns because I used to be a planner. But what comes up is uh, it's so confusing. So the old is, it's like you're disorganized or you're not committed to anything. Um, it feels selfish.
Yeah, so it's worth each of those things is worth looking at as they appear to you, right? So when you look at, say, the moment you say the word disorganized, right, there's a moral implication to that, isn't there? There's the underlying idea that the implication that you should be organized, that a good, healthy person would be organised.
Yes, absolutely.
What were the other words you
It's
said?
selfish.
So, oh, that's a good one. Selfish. Yes. Yeah.
That's a big one for me.
Yes. Yes. And the moral implications of that are really heavy, aren't they? I mean, you're
Mm,
almost evil if you're selfish. That can be taken to that extent. That selfish is wrong. Really, really wrong. And yet they'll turn around and whoever they are will put on those sympathy cards or whatever, sayings like you got to love yourself before you can love everybody else. But they don't say that's selfish, you know. So the really thin line here about what's acceptable, in fact, what's mandatory and acceptable, and what isn't. And selfish is a bad one. But looking after yourself, that's a really good one. How are they
the
different?
language is
Yeah,
really messed up,
crazy
isn't it?
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Amazing what one word seems to imply.
Yeah. I wouldn't, maybe I would say that I get triggered, but it's a kind of a low level trigger, but nevertheless, I get thrown into a really weird place when people ask me, how am I going? You know, what's been happening for you, Vince? And I have to go, I don't, what, I don't know, nothing significant, but I've been really busy doing it. It's a really weird one, and it's one we all face. How
I'm
should we
laughing, but
spend?
I'm not. Like this is like
Yeah.
I want to laugh, but it's
Well,
a
that's
really, it's a
yeah.
very, it's a very challenging thing. It's like it feels like someone said, "Do you want to do this?" You say no, and it stops there. Great, and it should stop there.
But it doesn't.
But it's difficult for people who consider themselves your friend to leave it there. For some reason, it's funny, it's your friends that consider that like they have to say something more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that includes me too. I feel like I have to explain something.
Yes. Well, that's another one that comes up, and Panilla has a great video on that, shaming, blaming, explaining stuff.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that's worth looking at. Um, yeah. So we call this. You can call it enlightenment. I really dislike that term. I think it doesn't mean anything actually. It's got a lot of baggage, so I prefer not to use it. But I would say, let's say waking up. That makes sense. It's a good analogy, to wake up. when these shifts occur to you. But the other one that's really, really relevant is liberation. And when you think of what are you being liberated from when you wake up? And it's obvious that you get liberated from the compulsion to obey social and cultural rules. And this is exactly what you're facing with all of these things. These social and cultural rules, the so-called norm of our society. Now, if a stranger says to me, "How you going?" I'll say, "Fine." It's easy. That's what's expected in the game. It doesn't matter what I'm actually feeling. Doesn't matter whether I've been fine, I am fine, or I'm not. Doesn't matter. I'll say fine. Now, that's what you do. Took me a long time to realise that when people said, "How you going?" what they really meant was "G'day."
Right.
That's a very Australianism, of course, but "G'day" is a good one because it doesn't. There's no question involved. It is wishing somebody a good day. There's no requirement for me to think or suddenly get propelled into what have I actually been doing, quote, in brackets, that is worthwhile, that is significant enough to relay to somebody else. I've been having a ton of fun. I've been blown away by blades of grass and potholes in the road and all sorts of things. But not one of those could I actually trot out as to say, I'm having a great life. I saw this blade of grass the other day and it blew me away.
I love that. It's exactly right. And this is a difficult transition
It is. And it's
to.
familiarity. It is a case of getting used to these things, like people don't literally mean, "How are you?" They don't really want to know your aches and pains or your joys. They're just saying hello. It's a hard one to not take things literally. For me, I don't know for others if it's the same thing. I imagine Maya takes things fairly literally. Mm.
I do. And what you don't know when you learn English as a foreign language, there are people saying to you, if someone asks you, how are you? You don't say how you are, you say fine. You are taught because it's known about the culture. And you don't have anyone to say that to you. You have to figure it out by yourself.
Yeah. My first language is French, and English is my second language. So culturally, it's completely different. And then it depends where you are. When I go home, if someone says, "Where are you from?" they don't want to know that I'm from, British Columbia. They want to know my ties to where they live. So I'll say I'm from Moncton, New Brunswick, which is where I'm originally from. And then the connection happens. And then you can have an open communication.
Yeah.
So culturally, I understand. And I remember moving to British Columbia, how I missed that, what I felt was a full cultural expression. It wasn't just language. Yeah.
So, how long
It
since
feels
you
the
moved
same.
from that? You
How
said,
long?
yeah,
35 years.
right. So, and then how often do you go back? You said when you go back, how often?
Every year or two.
Oh, okay, okay. I was going to say, yeah, probably that's too often to notice the change in language. But if you had gone back after 32 years, you would notice how the language has changed. Words will have slightly different meanings than they used to have 30 years ago.
I wouldn't notice because I have a communication with my family
Yep, yep. So you update it
pretty
on the
regularly.
fly,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. I just notice how I change and how my family's not liking the change.
Yeah. Well,
because
they
I
want you
used to
the way you
be,
used to be. They want you the way they
I
think you
was,
are. Yeah.
I was in service to everyone. It still happens when I go home.
Sure.
It still
Yeah, that's
wants
what
to,
happens. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
vortex,
Yeah. We get
and I
triggered
shrink.
back into. Yeah.
It's
We
very
literally
difficult.
become a different person.
Mhm. I do. And last time I was less into that energy, and I found out several months later that they said, "Monique, you weren't quite yourself. We were worried about you." Probably the happiest I've ever been.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I secretly was happy about that, but still couldn't say directly I'm happy about that because it still had to be that nice girl.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tricky stuff, but there are big discoveries about these little things, the so-called normals that you will run into quite frequently. So anytime you're puzzled, just go, oh, okay, that's nice. Let's just stay with the puzzle. Let's enjoy the puzzle, uh, and not look for an answer in particular. Just enjoy the puzzle, and that way you'll discover more. Yeah.
It's difficult to not want to do something.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I get
Like my
that.
head
Yeah,
wants to come up with a ready answer.
yeah.
It
Well,
just
you can
all falls
see
flat.
another commonly used phrase. What's those? Forget those cards. It's a good meme. Those greeting cards that people put sayings on all the time. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue anyway. It doesn't matter. But there are those sayings all the time, and um, one of those sayings. Oh, I've forgotten which one it was I was going to refer to now. Anyway, it'll come back to me. But yeah, there's lots of new discoveries for you in that.
And the other side is it feels like, although we're having this discussion, it feels like I'm recycling the same thing over and over again. It's always this personality aspect that wants to come up and make everything comfortable for myself, for everyone. And it's like I want to dismantle that, but that makes it worse. The more I think of changing that, the more intense it gets.
The appropriate technique for whatever turns up is to recognize that what turns up is not what it's about. What turns up is just the 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 response to a trigger, and it's what triggered it that is the actual issue, or that's where the juice is to look to investigate. But it's a good one to keep reminding yourself that end results, looking to fix something, looking for an outcome, is the wrong way to face anything. The whole idea that there's lots about us ourselves to discover. This is where we are. This is the adventure that we're on. It's discovering more and more and more. Now, not discover. As soon as I say it, I'm in trouble because I'm saying it's not about what we discover. It's about the attitude of discovery is where the value is, right? If you go looking for something, then you've got an image in your mind of what you're looking for, and that image is a fantasy. and you're looking for something to happen in the future. And all of this is wrong direction stuff. So when we're looking, what we're attempting to do without effort, what we want to happen is to be in a purely receptive state where we're simply looking around going, I wonder what's going to pop out from behind that tree or pop up from that grass or whatever. What is going to appear without preconceiving anything? It's a tricky and difficult place to get to because the mind wants to jump ahead all the time. It is a forward thinking thing, this brain of ours, and it predicts, right? So it knows to use the smallest amount of information it requires in order to come up with a story. And that's what we relate to, that story that it comes up. So this is what we're learning to not do. We're learning to relate with what is actually there, not our idea of what it is, but what is actual. And it takes practice.
I'm reminded, the word discovery, and when my thoughts were really building up,
Yeah, yeah.
I remembered you saying that, and I thought, I know, this is it. But instead, my head said, stop, stop, stop. And then I heard that and I thought, oh, can you stop? Can you stop? Do you need to stop? I don't need to stop. Oh, could you like be okay with that? Still like, okay, you know? Um, yeah, I could be okay with that. And then I just kept looking at it, and it softened. It softened. Even just seeing how hard I was on myself, how
Hmm.
judgmental I was,
Yep, yep.
not
Okay.
wanting. Yeah.
You just
So
triggered that what I forgot. You just triggered for me again,
you're
and that was
welcome.
that saying that the mind is a great slave but a terrible master. You've heard it before, okay? But this is exactly what's going on, isn't it? We're moving the minds. It's getting a demotion. It's no longer going to be the foreman running the show or the CEO taking big payouts for doing nothing. It's going to go back to the drawing board and be a proper slave. That's what we want. Yeah.
That would be a relief.
So every time the mind starts acting like a master, you go, hey, you've forgotten your new role. Your new role is to be useful from time to time, but otherwise, butt out. Not your job to tell me what to do anymore.
Thing is, I can't remember what that was all about. That's the amazing thing about the mind. The mind was just going on,
Yes. Yeah.
and there was just nothing in there. There's like super garbage. But part of me just wanted to stop. I don't know why. It
Yeah,
just
yeah,
felt
yeah,
so noisy.
yeah. And
I
even though
have
it's
no idea.
super garbage, it talks like it's really important stuff.
Yeah.
Mm. How are you, Casimir? Haven't seen you for a little bit.
I'm good. Feel like I'm on belief safari. I'm hunting down all these different beliefs that I didn't realize were there. But once one falls, another one becomes questionable, and then another one, and it kind of I don't know where
Yeah,
it'll end.
yeah.
Um, here's one. Oh, yeah,
Go on.
one that I'm stuck on, or I'm not sure. It feels like I'm not framing it quite right. essentially, I realized there seems to be a sort of double belief, or two that are sort of resting on one another, that helps reinforce this sense that I'm a me doing things, which is that first, there's this belief that there are separate things. So computer is here, window is there, there's different in 3D space, like they're actual objects. And there's sounds and sensations, like all these separate things. And then that justifies that, oh, well, there must be a singular me that is taking all those different things in experience and piecing them together into a single whole experience. And I can systematically look to see, okay, where's the actual evidence that there are really separate things, and that there really needs to be a single observer for it to appear that it's one thing. And I can fail in this search, meaning I can fail to find evidence of that, but it doesn't penetrate down to the sort of belief level. Like, it's just sort of a conceptual finding. Whereas there are other beliefs or other situations where it's qualitatively different, right? Like, you can sort of directly experience, like, oh, okay, there it is. And it has nothing to do with thought or concepts. But for some reason, this one, it's stuck in conceptual land. I cannot directly
Yep,
experience it.
I get it.
Any one
Yeah.
part of experience I can kind of fall into. So yeah.
Mm. In Fetterland,
Hmm.
you would be talking about the sixth and seventh fetter with
Okay.
the separate belief, separate objects, etc. Those beliefs. But they would say 6 and 7, if they appear to not want to fall, it's because one of the earlier fetters is still in play.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if this is actually the case for you, but if it were the case, we would look at the big ones, the really big ones, the sticky ones are 4 and 5, the desire and aversion, desire and ill will. They're the ones
Okay.
that they seem to have the most energy in our society. So we can say that 1, 2, and 3 can fall. Okay, so the recognizing there's no self there, doubts and rites and rituals. They tend to almost always go together. Although
Okay.
doubts will often return, but yeah. So then we've got desire and aversion, and the thing with the fetters is what it's about. What it's really good for, in my opinion, and others may have different opinions about this, is what the fetters are great for are remnants of stuff that's hanging around. So when the first fetter falls and you recognize that there's no self, there will still be unrealized beliefs that there is a self kicking around in there, and they're just hidden in dark corners, and essentially you don't even know they're there until something triggers one of them. And when that gets triggered, you'll see it, and immediately you see it, you recognize that it's just a remnant of the old way of being, and it goes. It just dissipates simply because
Right.
you
It's not
see
in the
it.
habit of seeing it directly. It just
Yeah,
happens.
you don't. Yeah, so as soon as it's seen, it's gone because it's obvious that it was resting on the idea that there was a controller in there running the show. So these will keep on happening until they don't. If they ever get to the point where they don't, I don't know that case will ever happen. We'll see. I mean, I've had experiences of stuff turning up 15 years later. So I don't know if that's typical or not, but I imagine it is. Um, So, like you could never say, oh, definitely that fetter's broken. I mean, a lot of people will say that, they will talk like that, but for me, it's a crazy claim to make, because how do you know until you don't? The only one
Right.
thing you can know is that it hasn't when something turns up. But yeah, so with fetters 4 and 5, and it's slightly tricky. It's not like the primary aim is to not have desire or aversions. That's a side effect, comes from recognizing that there's no actual desire or aversion inherent in any feeling. That the want for something or the aversion from something all comes from the stories that are associated with the sensations. And those stories plus sensations are the feelings that we get, and the feelings are the emotions that we experience. And so when we go, oh, I really want chocolate ice cream, right? There's a kind of a completeness about that really wanting chocolate ice cream, and we're thinking about chocolate ice cream, and our taste buds are getting active with the idea of having some chocolate ice cream, and so on. So there's a whole complexity of responses that goes with that. But when we start looking at them, and you look at the want, where's the sensation of wanting? Then it gets to be very clear very quickly that there is a sensation and then there is ideas. And the ideas are what give the sensation meaning, and the sensation seems to validate the ideas. So we get a circular closed loop validation thing going on, and it feels like there really is this thing called wanting that exists, but it actually is a construct. Um, and we put it together. Now, when you recognise that it's just a construct, if you go, oh, okay, what gives this meaning, what gives it direction, are the stories that I've got. And those stories are really complex, of course. They're always complex. Never is there just a single story by itself. All stories have stories within it and stories hanging off the outside of it and so on. And so this whole idea rests on ideas like, well, I could have ice cream. I've got ice cream in the freezer. All I've got to do is go and get it. All I've got to do is justify myself that it's okay for me to get it. Whatever routine we go through in order to, there are all these stories that are there, but they're what give it meaning. The sensation itself and the entirety of that fetter exercise is to see that there's no such thing as actual desire that exists, that it is a construct. And
is
then the consequence of seeing that is that desire doesn't happen in the same way. You might go, oh, there's a preference for ice cream, but it's held very lightly. Whether you do or you don't seems to be, well, that's another story.
Right, it becomes impersonal. So is the idea, because you said fetters 4 and 5, well, there's an order, it sounds like, and is the idea here that typically it's harder to directly see the later beliefs if you're still getting caught in the earlier ones, that you are advised to try to go in order? I mean,
not quite the way I would go about it, but yeah, it's a bit like that. There is that order, and some people will say you need to work through those sequentially. Some fetter aficionados will say that, and others will say, no, it's a spiral. They're all. You go around the loop many times by the time you get rid of all of them. And my experience is that it's a very useful construct, the fetters, but I wouldn't put any credibility in them for waking up per se.
Sure.
People love the idea of them because they're structured. They can measure where they're up to. They can say, "Well, I've broken fetters 3. I've now where's 4? Give me 4 so I
Achievement
can do
unlocked.
that." Yeah, yeah, tick it off. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's of course not what the intention is. So
Right.
that's yeah,
I can
yeah,
see the utility in, if I'm wrestling with some kind of belief or recurring pattern of beliefs, maybe if I can map that onto this framework, the
yeah,
framework can help point out other areas that I may not myself have thought to look.
yes,
And so I can
yeah,
check that and maybe then iterate around.
yep.
Is there a fetter that corresponds to this is sort of the other belief or investigation that's been interesting but tricky for me right now, related to time. I'm not sure if that maps onto this model, but just sort of um, failing to find evidence for the subjective experience of time if I look in direct experience, and then quite surprisingly finding that there's a lot of things, at least for me, that seem to be attached to that, right? And
Yeah,
the
yep,
whole
yep.
idea of me as a self, like that doesn't even make sense if you deconstruct the timeline on which I came from or would be going or the future, those
Mm,
sorts of things. And so it's been really interesting to start to see how many things are attached to that, but that also seems to make it really subtle. Um, and there's so many other beliefs that want to come in and refute the observation.
yes, yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
if that is captured here or
yeah, yeah, yeah. I would say that's the same fetter. The same
okay.
fetter. 6 and 7 is so what the Buddhists put it more originally, and I'm not really good at this. I'm really bad at this stuff.
Well, I'm
But
worse, so you're
yeah,
teaching
but
me
it's
stuff.
essentially that it will be written as um, the closer you get to what the Buddha was reported to have actually said about these things. And actually, I don't think the Buddha talked about fetters at all. But essentially, it's written as um, oh, look, I'm going to just look it up. I've got it written here somewhere. I'll just see. Oh, okay. The word I was looking for is fixation, right? That's written as
Mhm.
fixation on the idea of form, and fetter 7 is fixation on the idea of the formless. And so it's interesting when you consider that that's the way it's written. The important word is fixation on
Mhm.
those things, not the things themselves, but being fixated on them. And
Okay.
so fixated on form and formless, 6 and 7, and what form includes is distance. And
Okay.
distance refers to time.
Yeah, yeah, I noticed this. It was like if I'm looking at an object, I think that the first one was so my shoe was on the floor. There's this sense of, oh, that's an object, and implicitly there's a backside to it, right? Uh, and there's all these mental manipulations you can do, like, well, it's a thing, you could hold it, you could turn it around, you could do all this stuff. But that whole mental construction starts losing traction without the idea of this hypothetical future in which you could do all those things.
Mm,
I know this is
mm,
not a good logical argument, right? I'm not trying to refute anything logically, but just the felt sense of, oh, there's an object out there in 3D space.
yeah, yeah,
It's harder for me to feel if I don't simultaneously suddenly have this feeling of I really could pick it up, or it really could move, or there really is some hypothetical situation that isn't right here, right now,
mm,
in which that could happen. Um,
okay, right. So what the object of the fetter on form is about again, people will have different ideas. So there's, it's not so written in stone that there is no leeway kind of thing, because it's been transcribed from language to language to language over the years, and of course it gets changed. But anyway, my understanding of it is that the big insight to be had with fetter 6, which carries through to fetter 7, is that how do we construct the world?
Okay.
Right? So this is what you're talking about with that separation between you and others, or out there. Yeah. And there's a really, really simple exercise that is just so profound. And that is that you simply look straight ahead and you look at what's in your line of vision. You focus on what you see straight in front of you. So doing it now as I talk, watching something that you can see in sharp focus straight in front of you. Now notice, without moving your eyes or your head, notice that there is stuff in your peripheral vision that is blurry. Right? You can see a kind of a form and a shape, but you don't really know exactly what it is. Now turn your head slowly in that direction towards that blurriness, and watch when it comes into sharp focus, how the mind will immediately apply a label to it. Right? And it will almost be like a snap as the mind goes, got it.
Right, it's recognized.
Right. But it's more than recognized. It's connected to. It's connected with. So if you do this exercise, look for an imaginary, and maybe it's more than imaginary, maybe it's not, but look for an imaginary line that gets thrown out from some part of your body to that object when it snaps into focus and the label gets applied.
Okay. So the idea
Coming
being
out
like,
of some part of your body, maybe your forehead, there will be this cool snap, and it will be like you've got that. Now, if you just keep that in that hover in that kind of semi-fantasy state of that connection, then wait for a line to come back from the object to you. So it'll come back and probably hit you in a different part of your body. So it might go out from your forehead and come back into your chest, maybe. Whatever version of that connection is. Right? And this is how can you put it? It's a representative of your relationship with what.
yes, it's sort of the felt sense of where am I in space relative to this object, or what would
Or
have to
it
happen
in
for that.
relative to me. Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought to look to see whether that's there before the mind recognizes the object. With that's a fun,
Yeah,
that's a clever way
you just
to
play with
construct
that,
it.
right? Because it's an experiment, right? And
Yeah,
we don't know whether we're in fantasy land or whether it's real, that connection. It doesn't matter. It's just that's that felt sense that we're
right. The
talking about.
subjective. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
It seems it feels different from, but similar to, there's another one that came up when I was, again, just really trying to play with space, which is, if can be any object, but if you hold a finger out fairly close to you and you don't close one eye, I think usually people close one eye, but you keep both eyes open. So if I right now am looking at the screen, I'll see, a double image of my finger because it's out of focus. But while my gaze is focused on the screen, so that's what's in focus, the lenses of my eyes are focused there, I can focus attention on one of the two blurry fingers, uh, and actually it will sort of go in and out of being translucent. I think it's binocular rivalry or something. um, but I realize I'm not used to actually paying attention to the visual representation of whatever my gaze is not focused on, but you can. and it breaks, at least for me, it sort of breaks the sense of distance because this
Yes.
sort of like floated, blurry image of my finger. There's no felt sense of how close or far it is, but it's clearly seen.
Mm.
Um, and I wonder, yeah, so this is interesting.
It is. It's all very interesting. Yeah. Now imagine that you're looking through a window at a landscape, and there right in the distance over there is a mountain, and somewhere between the mountain and you there is a few trees, and then there's a roadway that seems to get narrower the further away it is, and so on. So you get this quite distinct feeling of depth, right?
Mhm.
And then you pan out a little bit, and you suddenly realize, because you've panned out, that that window isn't actually a window at all. It's a picture
Hmm.
on a
Mhm.
wall, right? Because now you've got the 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 frame is in it, and you can see that it's not actually the window. Oh, maybe it could be a window. You see, you don't know whether if
Hmm.
you're looking. So what's the difference if it turns out to be a picture, then it's two-dimensional with the illusion of depth
Right.
built into it, right? But if it's a window, is it still two-dimensional with the illusion of depth?
Right. Subjectively
To
speaking,
to the body, to the body, what's the difference?
right. Yeah, this was that actually there's another thing that I realized again with that little finger exercise is I'd always assumed, I guess subconsciously, or I'd mentally dismissed these out of focus double images as just like a natural result of the geometry of, binocular vision and having two eyes and things. But I guess I subconsciously took it as evidence that our brain, that we have more information than just a two-dimensional overlay visually. Because, well, clearly, 3D information because there's a double image here because I've got two eyes. But what was interesting, again, if I focus on any one of those two out of focus images when my gaze is focused on the screen, any one location, like a pixel within that part of that image, it's only ever one value, right? There isn't actually visually more information than a two-dimensional layout, which was surprising to me. Both that was the case, and the fact that I'd somehow never actually looked at that closely enough my entire life. My entire life I'd carried this as something like, well, clearly there's 3D information directly encoded here, but it's not. It's
Mm.
it's inferred. Um,
So
hmm.
so flipping back for a moment to how the object comes into focus, and that the mind immediately grabs it with a label,
Hmm.
right? And you see how, as a blurry object compared to it as an object in focus with the label, right, it hasn't changed at all. It's all about our perception of it.
I mean, yes and no. Like I think I totally get the point, but then I also get lost in a little rabbit hole of what is the it that implicitly existed independently, subjectively speaking, that didn't change when it came in and out of focus. Um,
Okay, that triggers something else for me that's really valuable here, right? Hmm. All of this stuff is about what we experience.
mhm,
And what we experience is is tied to this organism with the
mhm.
five senses and the mind, the six senses, if you like. But that's the origin of our experience in the world. Anything other than that is just about. It's conceptual.
Hmm.
And if I line you and a dog and a frog up to look at a tree, it's obvious that every one of you is going to have a totally different vision. The frog is not going to see anything unless it moves its head to have a relative movement thing. The dog is going to see in less colours than the person sees in, etc. So a cat will be different again. Every animal, everything you can think of is going to have a totally different experience of looking at that same object. So what is the actual object? Is it what we see, or is it what the frog sees? Right? That's right. So the obvious answer is something none of us actually see.
Mm-hmm.
We're all just seeing things according to the spectrum that our organs, in our case, our eyesight, is programmed to use. And so you get some weird people that see more colours than other people. Like, so that will be their experience of that. So what the actual object is unknown. Even if we go and we take a sample of it and take it back to the lab and put it under a microscope, that's got nothing to do with the totality of the object, is it? That's just the part that we chose to sample. And so we might, if we're looking at a tree, are we going to take a bit of the trunk back to the lab, or are we going to take a bit of leaf back to the lab, or what? So obviously, what the actual tree is in its totality is different for everybody and everything that experiences it in whatever way they experience it. So what it actually is really unknown. All I can know is my interpretation, which is established by my perceptive ability, which is conditioned by my experience in life and the amount of knowledge, dead knowledge I've got in my head, etc., etc. All of this changes my experience, but it's just my experience. And the person standing next to me is going to have a totally different experience because they had a tree fall on their house once, so their ideas of a tree is totally different to mine. I just love them because you can climb up them, or whatever, So everybody's got a different idea and relates to things differently. So the object that's out there, which includes other people, is unknown. And I'll go as far as to say unknowable. This puny mind can't encapsulate the totality of anything. It can only have its own interpretation according to its perceptive abilities. Yeah. Tricky one. So in that is a great freedom, a huge freedom for not knowing.
Yeah, I like that. Right, because there's really this strong impulse to need to know, or like to need to get to a conclusive, okay, fit this into the full framework, I know what this is. And it is this sense of, well, if I haven't done that, then I'm lost, or there's more yet to understand.
Yeah, you need to go back to school, you ignorant thing.
Right. But if we really try to just recognize over and over again the truth that the most we can know is raw experience, right? That's our perception. We cannot get out of that. That's the only thing we have.
And most people corrupt that raw experience with their mental overlay. And that's what we're learning as with experimenting, we're learning to get free from that.
I like that framing.
I want to go into that rave again about the existence of parallel worlds. And there's that world that most people will call the real world, that I call the unreal world, where society and cultures operate fluently. And that is a world of concept. It's almost entirely built on concept. It's all about what things mean, what things are about, what people are about, what it means for what everything they do. What does it mean? That's a world where it's the mind rules supreme in that world. And then there's a parallel world that exists beneath or below or further out than labels can go. And so when you start looking at it, if you your first reaction is going to be that there's a label will appear, just like when we did that exercise. A label will appear, and what we're doing with that label is we are constructing meaning, and then we're going to relate to what we've constructed, right? Well, if you get to the very edge of the world and labels are there, and beyond that, the world drops off. There is nothing. It's a flat world, if you like. And the edge, you come to the edge of the world with that label, and then beyond that label is what that's really about. So take a really simple example, like the label white. Right? You white anything. Take a white cup, a white car, a white piece of cardboard, and you look at it, and you go, "Oh, okay. Why is that white different on the left side than the right side?" Oh, it's because of the light on it. If I move my head over this way and look at it, it shifts. So white is not white. White is a whole range of colours that we just call white. Right? It goes from actually quite dark grey over to something almost shiny, depending on the way the light shines on this thing. But it's not the one colour, and yet we call it white. It's just a convenient label that we've got for things. And so beyond the label of white, which is a simplistic description of something, you've got all these variations in the colour. And when you and now I would be as helpless at trying to explain to you all those variations in colour, unless if I was an artist and I had 55 variations of white that had labels, I could go into them. But even 55 is not enough to cover all that are there. And so beyond the label, words don't work, but experience does. You can experience all those variations in white, but you can't talk about them. Right? The simple analogy would be me trying to explain to you what chocolate tastes like if you've never tasted chocolate, or what does an orange taste like if you've never had an orange. It's impossible. Can't be done. Right? So you don't even try and describe to me the variations in white. You just say white when you're communicating. But if you're not communicating and you get into, oh, look at that variation. Oh, look, is that a shadow? Oh, it's just, there is just so much in there. There is so much information. And the experience
Is there
for you is
regardless
just, yeah. And there is a whole world that operates, that exists below the level of labels, below the level of words. And that's a world where the magic is. That's the world where that blade of grass will blow you away, or where the way the tissue box sits on the table you'll just go, oh wow, look at that. Yeah. You will never be able to describe to anybody else what moved you about it, because it's such a simple, as soon as you bring it back to words, it's like, what? What are you talking about? It's just a tissue box on the table, and you're just blown away by the angle of it, and the shape of the roundness of the sharp edges, or whatever has caught your attention. At that level, that words can't describe. That's the world where the magic exists. That's when yeah.
Yeah, it's really
I'm
it's
I'm
interesting
talking
to
too much
think
here.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fine.
It's
I
all
can
right.
be quiet in a moment, but I was just going to finally reflect on that connection of specifically couching this world of concepts as being tied to culture, to society, because as you were saying that, I realized what's very true is we can share concepts, but we cannot directly share subjective experience, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
And so from that framing, I feel like in this community, there's often a lot of, poo-pooing of concepts and like they're bad, but it's kind of amazing that concepts let us, or that they can be shared between people and
Yeah,
among
yeah,
people. And
absolutely. They're
that's,
very useful for that. Yeah.
and it, I don't think society or culture would be possible or nearly as effective without that. But then yes, it is necessarily a narrowing of the bandwidth because we cannot fully share the personal first person experience.
Yeah,
So we have to
exactly. Yeah.
put it into these buckets and assume that the other person can map it to their same internal experience. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's fun.
So talking of narrowing the bandwidth, so here's a great one in terms of your question about time.
Mm.
Is now this moment, we can use words like this moment, but you get
Hmm.
what I mean. Now,
Yeah.
this, is it a moment in time sandwiched between the memory of the past and the fantasies of the future, or is it something else altogether?
Yeah. It's all concepts. I mean, that sounds so hand wavy, but if you don't go to a label, even, I mean, now is a label, right? But if I try to intuit the what that's pointing to, there's nothing to compare that to other than itself. And yeah, it's weird.
Mm.
There's a simple exercise you can do. If you, the thing that you're saying, you're over here and the object is over there. If you had never learned here, let's say you and the computer screen, if you had never learned here and there, would the computer screen actually be distant?
I see. You're saying same game of if I'm not allowed to use concepts, how do I know that the computer screen is there?
You said it a while ago. You can sometimes see it like 2D,
Hmm.
and that's when you forget the concept of here and there. Your
Mm,
mind is not on that.
right.
And that's because here and there is a fiction. Before
This
you were
gets very
taught that,
tricky.
before you were taught here and there was no here and there.
I mean, they're useful concepts, but it's not the same thing as what's, yeah.
And what is it that tells you that you are here but a concept? All you have right now is the present experience. How do you know that the whole present experience is not aware and you're just another object? Just to take it a step farther, it's a concept that I'm here and that I'm in here behind the eyes and between the ears. It's a concept. Can you really say without that thought consciousness is located in anywhere in that room? The only evidence is that it's global, direct experience. It wouldn't be here in your head unless you were taught here. Do you see what I'm pointing to?
Mm-hmm.
It's a fun exercise.
Just to extend that a little bit, it's easy to see how we construct distance with here and there. What about how we construct continuity with now and then?
Mm.
I was going to say how we construct time, but time is not time. Time, it's easy to see that time is purely a concept, but this feeling of continuity,
Right.
which is the
Identity
same
cannot
thing as
exist without
time.
continuity.
Yeah.
But then also with these exercises, especially some of these really, really direct, sort of surgically precise ones, I don't know why with some of them or some aspects of them, I get it, but it's sort of conceptual. You know, conceptual in the sense of I can follow along and I see in my experience what's being pointed to, but it doesn't necessarily collapse the feeling of separation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are other aspects of these exercises where it does, right? And where the actual felt experience changes, like my actual perception, you know, oh, where's my head? Like not
Yeah.
just conceptually, but there's no longer a felt experience of that.
It's no longer
Um,
confined by a belief.
and yeah, I don't know, or I'm curious about what determines that difference between just maybe really accurately, precisely, conceptually getting the pointing and understand, okay, within my subjective experience, this is how it works, and I can see it, versus that other response that sometimes happens and
Yep.
sometimes
Yep. Yep.
sticks, and I cannot see it a different
Yeah.
way, where it's just
Yeah.
now, oh no,
It's a big issue. It's something that I've been faced with the whole time I've been guiding at Liberation Unleashed, right? That difference between getting it intellectually and we talk about a more visceral getting it
yeah,
kind of thing. And you know, I've contemplated this quite a lot, and I come to the conclusions that, and of course this is all mental, isn't it? That when we say it's an intellectual understanding, it's simply incomplete, right?
hmm.
For it to be a bodily understanding, it also has to be an intellectual understanding. This is what a lot of people miss when they get the idea that it's either intellectual or it's a bodily knowing of it. However they put that, a visceral understanding, if you like. But
Hmm.
essentially, it's always going to be intellectual before it's visceral.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to see that when it's only intellectual, that there's still something that's not seen, because that final seeing that makes it a visceral understanding is still dropping a belief.
Hmm.
It's still, no, well, I say dropping a belief, that's the wrong way to put it. It's still recognizing that a belief no longer holds water.
Yeah, I'm trying to think carefully. So in my own experiences, right, for perceptions that for me have kind of gone through this, where there was a very strong, maybe frustratingly strong intellectual understanding, and then for whatever reason, one day, usually not when I'm actually doing a meditation or paying attention to it, it's usually when I'm just walking around, something just shifts, and then from being able to look with attention, not necessarily with the eyes, but like at that part of experience that for whatever reason in that moment now I'm able to rest attention on directly, right? From that perspective, it is then self-evident that isn't any of the concepts. But it doesn't feel like I got that by realizing something new about the concept or breaking through a belief. It just, if I were to plainly describe the experience, I would say like something just changed in my brain and then suddenly, this
Yep.
popped out. And it feels like it was more reverse engineered of from that I was able to then go see, oh, those beliefs aren't accurate, or I need to update my worldview or something to match this
Mm.
irrefutable aspect of experience. but that leaves me with no insight as to what caused that to suddenly pop out.
And that's the nature of most shifts. Well, we don't really recognize what it is that shifted because we suddenly find ourselves looking at things from a different angle than we used to, and we don't know how we got here. We can construct a story about how we got here, but it doesn't mean anything more than it's a story. And sometimes that story will be fairly accurate, but a lot of the time, as you say, you simply won't know, right? You can logically presume that a belief has changed. A belief that was limiting you before is no longer limiting you. So, but that's a logical conclusion. To identify what that belief was gets very hard because it gets us down to beyond the level of words. What's different? It's a felt difference. Definitely a felt difference. You know that. But trying to describe what that felt is not really possible. You can kind of maybe, maybe it was here, or maybe it's here, or I don't know, But yeah.
It's very interesting and also frustrating.
Well, what's frustrating, and that's good value for you to say that, because you can go, well, what is frustration? And as soon as you look at that, you go, oh, okay, there's a need to know here. The frustration is that I don't know.
Yeah, you're right.
I've got to be able to pin it down. I've got to be able to be precise about what it is. And then you think, well, why? Why do I need to know? What is it? Isn't it, like, you wake up in the morning and there's a wonderful present at the foot of your bed. Do you just enjoy the present, or do you demand to know how it got there?
Yeah, no, you're totally right.
So I didn't see your eyes light up and an expression on your face that told me that both with the exercise of turning your head and watching how something comes into focus and gets a label and becomes an actual object that we relate to, that didn't light you up like a Christmas tree. Neither did the idea of what is now. Is it actually a place in time? No, that didn't light you up either. So you caught them in your mental net and put them aside for later.
Well, what lit me up was seeing an avenue with those exercises that felt promising of, okay, if I repeat this and I look more carefully and keep trying it over and over again, when maybe one day I'm just not bringing in some other belief that I don't realize I usually bring in, that this feels like an approach to get under some beliefs that other things I've done didn't feel as pointed at. But you intuited correctly that in those like just now, that did not cause a non-conceptual shift around what was being pointed to, but it did feel like it was providing a different way to try to get under or behind maybe some of those beliefs. But again, and I don't know if this is typical or not, for me so far, I don't think I've ever had a strong non-conceptual shift that kind of sort of sticks actually during any meditation or during any practice. It certainly seems to correlate with times where I'm generally in life doing a lot of practice around investigating that. But it's usually when I'm specifically not thinking about it or trying to do anything, just walking around my day by
That's
day.
very common. Yeah, that's the way it is, because that's when your defenses are down. Right? So when I put it to you that you caught this in your conceptual net and put it aside for later, Right? That's a good description of what could have happened. Right? That your spontaneous defenses got activated, right? And you're not going to allow that change to get in there straight away so easily, however you want to put it. You're going to take it away and cogitate on it, etc., which is a way of not getting there, right? So it's all of this is defensive stuff that goes on, and that's not being critical of that. Not,
No, no,
that's
I
that's
think you're
just
completely
natural.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, I don't think trying to brute force through that would be more effective for me.
Absolutely, we cannot brute force anything. That's for sure. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but all I'm saying is, if you recognise that the reason it didn't have that perceptual shift for you was simply because you automatically defend, as we all
Mm.
do. You know, in the, we want to we don't want those last vestiges of the controller to be gone until we're feeling comfortable with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd add to that, and I could be wrong. This is a attempted introspection in the moment. That in addition to there being possible defenses or discomfort with certain beliefs dropping, for me, I feel like when I'm doing these exercises, either now or previously, because I'm doing them deliberately, the mind is fully engaged and waiting to make sense of it, to understand it, right? And sort of to your earlier point, there's just this deep, and maybe it's more in me than in other folks, I don't know, but this really deep, strong desire to understand conceptually. Whereas when these things just kind of pop up in the wild, when I'm not trying to do it, and maybe this is what you meant by my defenses are down. There's no context whatsoever in that moment for trying to understand it because I wasn't knowing that I was looking for it. It's sort of like I guess, practiced it enough that it became habitual, and then attention moved on its own, just out of habit. And it feels like there's an important detail there of it happening at a time when the mind isn't ready to try to grab it and own it and understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Paul did a lot of research at Liberation Unleashed during his waking up period, and he went through all the archives of people who had woken up, and he came to the conclusion that almost everybody had their shifts when they were doing something mundane. They were washing the dishes or mowing the lawn or whatever, but they were not meditating or trying to wake up at the time it happened.
Huh.
Yeah, that's a big
So
one. Yeah,
it might be interesting, now or in the near future, we might have sufficiently powerful, just large language models or machine learning to go back through the archives and really, like at a level
yeah,
that a human might be able to extract what are the most effective trends or observations.
absolutely. I'm really looking forward to that. That's artificial intelligence has great promise in that area.
Hmm.
Yeah, it will be the best guide ever eventually, I'd reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that could be really cool, right? Everyone gets basically a personalized to
yeah.
them. Oh, huh.
Mm.
I'd be interested to research the linguistic patterns before and after the awakening, if I
Yes.
can get to the archive.
Mm. Oh, they're available. No worries there. We can organise that. Yeah. Yeah, there's obviously technical questions about, how do we feed it if we have to go page by page by page through it all. There's a lot of work involved in getting all of that. So how can we set it up so that all of those files are available as one big file with
Don't worry about
subheadings?
that.
No, it can be
Don't worry
done.
about that.
That's what this mind does. How can we do that? Yeah.
Well, immediately following the shift, there's often confusion about using the word I,
Yes.
which is very, very apparent. that sticks out like a sore thumb in most of them.
This one and how the verbs are used. I'm interested in how the verbs are used.
Yes. Yeah, well,
And
that's
they
for me, that's
frequently,
the big change.
yeah, and
Sorry,
they
Paul.
frequently say they can't explain it, which is another one that sticks out, which is actually accurate because you really can't explain this. You can kind of point all around it, but you can't point right to it. And people are a little frustrated. They show frustration at not being able to describe it. So after that initial period wears off, I don't know that it's anything that noticeable in terms of linguistic change. But that's something that I always look for when I was doing confirmations is that trouble with words, particularly pronouns right afterwards, and saying they don't know how to explain it. That's a big one for me.
Mm. And when I was active doing what you called, that time we used to call them confirmations of people that they had actually had a visceral shift and were through the gate, so to speak. Looking at the answers that people wrote to those final questions, which were designed as to be an indicator of where people might still have work to do. I found that guides would jump on certain words. Was the tricky thing was, when they said I, for example, um, some guides would assume that they were still talking in the first person, when of course they were just using language because there was no other way to say it. And so that became a bit of a trick. What I discovered was I just looked for the tone and so here we're reading written words, but I'm looking for a tone. What I'm looking for is a sense of gratefulness, a sense of humility, a sense of lightness, a sense of humor. These tones in the words that are written is what I was looking for. Now, artificial intelligence can pick up on tone. It you can actually ask it to rewrite it with what it's come up with a different tone. So it knows about that stuff, but that's something that rarely gets discussed. And for me, if they came across with that right tone, I would confirm them, rather irrespective of the words that they used.
There's a book waiting to be written.
Yeah, there's more than one, but yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I just I mean I but once upon a time I wanted to fix the whole world. It was a really big deal, and I guess I still do. But I also recognise now that that's not going to happen like that. And so then I kind of pulled my head in a little bit and said, well, I'll wake up the world one person at a time. Uh, and that's kind of seemingly, but I get really excited with the idea that, with the proper development of artificial intelligence, this can just explode out into the world in a huge way. I mean, who would not want to feel the lovely feelings that I have all the time? Who would want to continue their suffering? What a crazy world it is, like we all want to feel good. That's what life means. Good feelings. Let's if we could just burst it out there into the whole world feeling that way, all of a sudden people would go, "You want me to go to war? Fuck off. I'm not going to war."
I think one challenge though that might still remain is, so yeah, also super excited about, okay, this seems like a good fit for potentially, machine learning, customize, learn the pointers, all that. And I don't know if I have a non-representative bias because of my background, but I think you first need someone to even be interested in this and to take it seriously. And there's so much strongly unscientific clouds of things around it that are discussed that will immediately repel a large, I perceive to be a large category of people. And so I sometimes wonder how much good can come even from finding ways to present it that aren't offensive to logic or to senses. I think some people are completely naturally okay with either suspension of disbelief or separating it. Okay, we're talking about subjective experience, or even they don't hold too strongly to science in that regard. But for others, like that's a hard wall, and they've probably spent their entire life being exposed to uh, misunderstandings about all this that put it far into that category that justifies their perception of this is total bogus.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot to take in, a lot to consider as well. Yeah. So could you say that there was something in common between all of the people who voted Trump into office? I'm not asking you to say what it would be, but does it seem to you logical that they all had something in common that led them to
Depends on
vote for him?
how abstractly am I allowed to define the something? Because if you go
Yeah,
abstract enough, sure.
yeah,
It would, some combination of life experiences and values and just,
yeah, a complete
yeah.
soup of something. Yeah, but it's easy to see that there was some thread that moved through all of them in order for that to happen. Hmm. And so we might approach that demographic with different language in order
Mm.
to be attractive to them than we would to the people who all the university students and lecturers and so on. We would use different language again. But could we go as far as to say that there was a sameness about their experience that caused them to see the world in the way they do? And would it in fact be even the same as the ones who were Trump voters? Right? It's the same thing, but in a different direction, kind of thing. I'm being very vague here, and
Yeah, yeah.
I need to be. But what I'm saying is, really, it's probably the whole world is going to come down to I just want to feel good, and how we go about feeling good, what we think we need to feel good, turns out to be really different to what we actually need to feel good.
Although if I
Well,
again were to play sort of devil's advocate on that, or trying to think of the failure modes of that way of presenting it for certain groups of people, and again, I have no idea how representative my experience is, which is still unfolding very much so. Um, I see an end of suffering seeming to be the main selling package for this. For me, that was not the case. It was really just curiosity and continues to be curiosity. And again, I don't, you would have a much better perspective from seeing so many people go through this well past, insights I've figured out. But from my perspective, the practical applications to life, meaning reducing suffering, seem to be almost nothing until something sinks in deeply enough. So it seems like, almost a step function. where maybe up until that point, they're dependent on someone's life situation and the background and context they're coming from. There might be a lot of conceptual insights or ideas one is exposed to that helps reduce suffering, but more through the traditional way that, reframing something can, or just different, cognitive behavioral therapy, those types of mechanisms. And I worry about not a false promise, but presenting something in a way that sets up a strong expectation for people of, oh, it should lead to this within this amount of time. And if that's their primary motivation, I could imagine a lot of folks kind of not sticking with it long enough to have a big thing happen, which, could be years and years.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Oh, look, I get it. There is a huge amount of complexity in it. And all of this needs to be explored. Well, it doesn't need to be. It won't be unless it is. But yeah, we can explore it, and lots of possibilities come out of it. Yeah. So I wouldn't. I mean, to say to reduce suffering is a kind of a gross way to look at it, because a lot of people would say they're not suffering, and yet somebody who is awake looking at their life would say they think they're not suffering, but they are suffering. That may be the case. But then again, that opens up another one. If they don't think they're suffering, are they suffering? How can you suffer without thinking you're suffering? So who knows? There's a lot to it. But I see a much more realistic baseline for this whole thing would be not the no longer suffering thing, but rather something positive, like being generally happier. And even happiness then becomes a shitty one. So let's say a, a more frequent experience of contentment might be a better baseline to look at. I mean, I used to have a thing going where I thought the savior of the world would be to introduce mindfulness into schools at an early age. Let's start teaching the kids at kindergarten level about mindfulness. And then so I had this story going, whereas if the whole world introduced this, then it would only be 30 years before those kids in kindergarten were adults ready to step in and run the world, and they would be running it from a different place to what it is today. If they had mindfulness, if they understood the place that the mind has in a happy individual, that would change the world in 30 years. That's simple. I mean, I've been around double that time and more, nearly 3 times that amount of time, and I've only seen it go backwards, not forwards. So the idea of mindfulness in schools was something that I got off on in the early days, and there's a bit of that happens these days. There is a mob that doing that in this country, but it's not happening universally. So consequently, we still have all these right-wing governments getting in all over the world and wanting to start wars and so on. But that's just the way it is. So I have to accept that at my age, at 77, I'm unlikely to be alive to see the world in a state of peace with no wars. It's not likely to happen while I'm in the next 20 or 30 years if I live that long. But I'm still full of hope. Yeah.
Cosmo, what you're kind of pointing at is a lot of people come to this with unrealistic expectations. And if you don't believe that, look at the list that was compiled over time, the disclaimer list over at Liberation Unleashed. It's Liberation Unleashed is not this, not that, not this, not that, not. It never says what it is because you really can't. But that's to weed out every item on that list is a result of someone guiding somebody and dragging them through the mud for about a year before they realized they shouldn't be here, that they were wanting the end to something or another. So the list is just a perfect example of unrealistic expectations that come in. And if you can't solve unrealistic expectations in a client, they'll they'll figure it out and leave. There's a lot of them do that. Very
Yeah.
few
Cool.
are actually attuned to this. It's kind of sad but true.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a bit of a catch-22, right? That without sounding wishy-washy, but like what is on offer in some sense literally cannot be put into words, right? You can try to triangulate it through many different pointings. But then you also don't want people to come in with false expectations. And so how do you convey to someone that this is worthwhile, like really worth putting in a lot of effort, without in that process having them come in with some false expectation?
All you could do is guide them, and at some point they'll realize their expectation was false and they'll leave. If their expectations fall away or they don't have false expectations, then they keep going, and that's a good sign. It's not for everyone. I mean, there's just people that just simply aren't ready for this.
Well,
Because
you could say that if they have false expectations that seem impervious to correction, you could just also describe those people as being very defensive. You know, that there's some reason why they're hanging on to those expectations so tightly. And so it would seem that although Liberation Unleashed is not equipped to get around that, it doesn't mean that it's not possible. So what we need is an approach for those particular people. So is there something in common with people that hang on tightly to expectations in spite of being told that they're unrealistic and not likely to happen? There probably is. Yeah.
It's just the strength of the belief, and that's what I always do research on, is how do you unbind that thought from that strong emotional attachment to it, which is really what the belief is, and I don't have the answer for that yet.
Yeah. Well, I would immediately say that strength of the belief is directly proportional with the fear of letting go of it.
I would agree.
And that's whatever's behind it. Yeah. And the crazy thing is that all these monsters that we're afraid to confront turn out to be nothing. Usually, no matter what they turn out to be essentially shadows on the wall rather than actual monsters. Yet they're big enough for a lot of people to never get past. I saw a thing the other day that was interesting, and it confirmed. I love confirmation, and this was Christiana writing something about, and she posed the question: what is the single most advantageous attitude that a seeker can have that will say that they're likely to wake up? And I came to the belief a long time ago that persistence is probably the biggest thing, So I would go as further to say that the flavour of the persistence needs to be somewhat obsessive. If we're burning to wake up, then that's the best indicator that it will happen. And she basically was saying the same thing. Persistence is a big thing. And one of the things with persistence is that people will stay with it long enough to get through whatever their blockages are. if they see it. But the ones who come along and get confronted and run away straight away, of course, that's a different story, and they're the ones that generally won't get past whatever their blockage is because they're not confronting it; they're avoiding it.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
desire has to be strong.
Yeah.
That's why I like that question. How important this is to you. I love to see people say out of 1 out of 10, the ones that say 11, I say, that's what I like to see. How
Mm.
bad do you want it? I want it 11 instead of
Yeah,
10.
yeah. Even a 9 says, okay, what are you holding back? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good place to start.
So when in a way that we're philosophizing here, and that's best not indulged in too much. But at the same time, there is a connection to actual experience in this, um, and that most of us here, I would say, I would even go as far as to say all, at least in my story, it's all everybody that's here. Um, we were born with a weird gene. Right? So there's something a bit weird about us where we're right from the beginning, we went, there's something different about us. Why are we not like all those other kids? What's different? Uh, and it seems to be that one of the ways that shows itself is a slightly variations, of course, but maybe a questioning. I was going to say rebellious, but rebellious may not work for some. But certainly a questioning attitude towards things. And I remember even as a young kid, I questioned the way things worked, and it was really obvious to me that a lot of the things that people took for granted was crazy stuff. So and that also led me to be much more focused on how unfair the world was. Unfair. Our society was unfair. It treated me unfairly all the time. Um, So that's stuff that might be in common with most of us who turn up here and who become seekers. But with the people who never become seekers, don't don't not become seekers because they never suffer. They is it because they don't ever get to consider the possibility that there is an alternative to that suffering? Maybe that is the case. I'm sure that is the case for past generations. They never they figured that's the way what life had offered them, and that's what they were stuck with. They never considered that they could see it differently.
Yeah, they were handed religion, I guess, not this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you go. I mean, how much of the world is religious, and how obvious it is to me that it hasn't done the job in a lot of cases. It's certainly at a global level. It certainly hasn't decreased the number of wars in the world. In fact, at one point, it was responsible for every world war in the world.
Yeah, yeah. Well, um, maybe this movement, now that the internet's here, this movement is spreading like wildfire, or from my perspective, it is compared to what it was like when I
Yeah,
started.
absolutely.
So
Yeah, for sure.
there's hope.
There, as a seeker, I felt I was the only one in the world for a long time. So, how's your recent experience been, Maya?
Hi. So the most recent one, sitting in this meeting and at some point really, really feeling that I wanted to give a lecture to you about developmental psychology and how we are doing things in reverse and everything. And with that shoe that you said, I'm watching the shoe from the front and there is something behind that I'm not seeing now. So, but then I thought this is not the place for lectures. And then there was a feeling, this feeling in me, and I was just observing that. So everything I do is this now. Basically, whole day, every day, it just pops into my mind, and I process many, many things in this way. This is what I do. And then at some point I thought, I was looking at something, I don't know what. But then I thought, well, this visceral feeling, this sensation, Marius asked me once, and a few weeks ago, what is this? How is this feeling? What's the sensation of wanting or not wanting? And I just said it's pulling or something. But then I understood I really don't see well the sensations in me. I should look harder somehow. There must be more to that, because everything I feel in my body happens somewhere here in the chest, in the front, as if I didn't have the rest of the body. So this was weird to me. It must be that things are occurring somewhere else also. And then something happened also. I don't remember what it was exactly. I just remember it happened once, that there was something, there was a sensation that was felt really in my arms, and I know what it was. It was guilt that I wasn't with my parents on Christmas, but I decided not to go because I am too tired. I cannot go every week. I need to stay at home for 2 weeks in a row. And then at some point there was guilt, and I felt it in my arms and in my legs, like some kind of weakness, like something, feeling weird. And I thought, this is good. It's not in the chest. It's not in the same old place. So this is what I do. I'm looking at searching. Where do I feel it? How do I feel it? And the interesting thing now with Casimir also, you said to him, there were two things. The one is the world is unknowable. And then I thought something that was discussed later on, like there are so many features that we don't see, that we don't perceive. So the things around us are unknowable to us. And I thought, oh, and I actually believe that and there are other people, I know people who operate with belief that we do see everything, and that what we see is everything. And then I thought further, oh, there are groups of these people, and they're sharing the belief that there is something objective, and that we can see it, that everyone can see it, and that it's objective. And I thought, oh, my department of psychology, they're all like that. They're living around a shared objective reality, which is not. And then I got the wish to give a lecture, so I won't do that.
Yeah, you're welcome to.
So the world is,
Yeah.
Sorry?
You're welcome to give a lecture. It's always very interesting to accumulate more knowledge.
Maybe not. Maybe not. There are two. I have to. There are 2 points in developmental psychology when we lose ourselves. So what we are trying to do, I see it now, we are trying to reverse it. We try to unlearn what we had to learn once. One thing is the so-called object permanence. And this is when children start understanding that an object that they don't see anymore, that it still exists somewhere behind a chair, behind something, that
Out of sight,
the
yeah.
object is still there. This was with the shoe. You said, I see the front of the shoe, but I have to know, I have to think if I want to know that there is behind the shoe as well. So this is something that occurs around, I don't know, by heart, 1 year, 6 months, between 6 months and 1 year somehow. And another thing that when we acquire the sense of self, you can figure it out with the child. There's a test. You just put a point of a cream on the nose of a toddler, also around a year or so, and put the child in front of a mirror. If they try to touch the points in the mirror, they don't know that they are looking at themselves. If they try to touch it on their nose, they have the sense of self.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a classic experiment, that one, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that some animals, like chimpanzees and that, also have a sense of self.
Also have that.
Yeah. And some birds even.
So
yeah.
these must be 2 points when we lose ourselves. And we are trying to undo now.
Mm.
To go back. And the third thing was with conceptualization in different cultures, different languages. There is yes, it's different. It's different. There is a book by a linguist, and the name of the book is very thick, so I don't recommend to read it for you to read it. But there's a title of it is Women, Fire, and Dangerous Things. Because in every language, we put things in groups. We see things in groups, and then we operate. It's easier to operate on things if you know it belongs to a certain group with some properties. And you know what you do in English with, for example, countables and non-countables. With some you use many, with the others you use much, and this is it. An example of it. There are many in every language. So there is people somewhere, I think in Australia, they put women, fire, and dangerous things in one conceptual group. They see something common in this. And this is like fun because there's fire and women and fire and dangerous things all together. But somehow they see it as the same thing. So, and we don't. In any other language I know, we don't group these 3 things as one. So conceptualizing is different. And also the scripts, we talked about how do you say, how are you? And we said, you say fine in English. I'm so sorry, Bianca is not here now. As far as I know, in Polish and in Croatian, it's expected of you to complain.
Oh, okay. Right.
So this was the lecture end of it.
Mm. Well, I love that last one because it just suddenly it switches things around. Ooh, yes.
Yeah.
It's appropriate to complain. Yeah. How much complaining? Do we give you the details of how everything's gone wrong or just the fact that everything's gone wrong? Yeah.
The more the better.
Okay. Whoa, yeah.
I know a lot of people that should move to Poland.
Yeah. So what would be the response if somebody said fine instead of complaining? If they said fine in that thing, would that be seen as that really is something wrong?
If it's consistent with the body language, then it's okay because the person is obviously fine. But otherwise, it would be a rude dismissal of communication, of request for
Okay, yes,
communication.
yeah. It would be the same as saying, piss off, don't ask me that. Yeah,
Yes. Or I don't have time for you or something.
yeah. Very impolite. Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's a gross variation of stuff between cultures. But even within one culture, there are almost unimaginable variations of things. So we have every family is a unique culture as well. Although we can say there are a lot of things in common, but things happen in a family that's really strange, you know. My wife and I frequently experience, and I say frequently, it can be many times a day. We'll whether it's got to do with our age or what it is, I don't know. But we can't remember somebody's name, and I'll just say it's him, and she'll know who I'm talking about. It's amazing. And the other crazy thing was when I forget, she'll forget. So we'll both, and same way the other way around. She'll forget, I'll forget. If she says I can't think of so and so's name, I won't be able to think of it either until later, and it'll come. It's amazing. It's amazing. Yet we both know who we're talking about. We can confirm that later. It's crazy, crazy stuff.
We too.
I always thought there's got to be some kind of really interesting something going on in the brain when you forget the name of something or even forget an idea, because you can systematically go through a bunch of other words or names, or people can feed them to you, and you can confirm, no, it's not that, no, it's not that. So
Yeah,
somehow you know enough to be able to rule everything else out,
yeah,
but you don't remember enough to know what it is. It's like you remember the shape of the hole, but somehow can't fill the hole. Like how is that even possible?
yeah, exactly.
I have to mute myself now.
Mm.
We're talking about that. There's a tribe down in, I think it was South America, that, where the tribe survives is the, if the tribe doesn't survive, the individual does, right? They have no word and have no concept of I, me, my, or mine. It doesn't exist in the language. And everything is just a tribe, but they don't even say we. They don't really actually even have pronouns in the language. It's practically just a language of verbs and descriptors. It's all action, present moment action, and descriptions of action, and possibly some reference to the past. Well, I saw game out. Well, there was game out. I didn't say I saw a buffalo out in out there. There's there's just a description of buffalo are out there, and that they lack any individual sense of I at all, which just points to the fact that yes, we are undoing something we are taught. We are taught I, you know, and this is just such a strong belief once it's ground in like that.
Well, it is. I mean, it's a universal religion, I, and thoughts and being intelligent and so on. So it's right from the very beginning. You know, we when the baby utters its first word, we praise it. How good is that? Hey, it said dad or mum or something. So it's first bit of identification. And an interesting one that I read somewhere a long time ago was that babies will be talking in their head for several weeks before they actually utter words out loud. So the words are already formed as an idea before they can actually say the word. So it's not that we're taught to use the word I. The religion is about what that means. We put it up on a pedestal and we worship it right from the beginning, thinking, conceptualizing. And it's obvious that we start to teach the child that with labels. First job we teach it is who it is. At the same time, we're teaching it who mum and who dad is, or whatever. Yeah. I mean, everybody, I say everybody, but obviously not literally everybody, but everybody eventually goes from crawling to walking. And yet, when that child takes its first steps, we're so full of praise for it, how wonderful it is. And we tell everybody, you know, it took its first steps. It's actually stood up and walked. Why do we give that? Why do we put so much energy into that? And are we also not teaching that child something that it's going to unlearn later when it comes here?
This is just what I was thinking. The energy we put in learning something for us to try to unlearn it later on. The energy in one direction and then the energy back.
Mm. Yet I've considered this from the perspective of would it be possible not to go around that route? Do we have to learn in order to unlearn? Is it possible that a child could be brought up uh, where they don't learn those things? Now, and that's not I don't get any clear ideas about that one. And so we have Andre there, who's not showing his face, with a 9-day-old baby or thereabouts at the moment, and can he bring up that child without teaching it all this shitty stuff that it's got to unlearn later on? I don't know the answer to that. We would love to yeah. Or is it appropriate that do we need to have an ego, a stable ego, before we can recognize that it's just a conceptual overlay that caused all the problems in our life?
I read somewhere that we need to have a stable ego before we start anything else. And as a researcher, I can tell you it would be considered unethical to try to do it.
Mm.
Well, teaching fear is a survival tool, which is it's a double-edged sword in a way because fear haunts us. But teaching fear is if you don't teach a child if you have two children and one of them is stuck on examining a flower in the woods all the time and noticing the texture, but the other one is taught, look out for danger, look out for wolves, then survival is the child who has fear, who's looking around to find the wolf. The child that is not taught that fear, well, he becomes food for the wolf. So if it's survival in a lot of shit that what we're calling shit is fear-based learning how to stay in the middle of the herd rather than becoming an outlier in the herd where the predators get you. So, I mean, you think about it, like when you teach little kids, like, there's monsters under the bed, and if you get out at night, the monster's going to get you. You know, that came up at a time when if a child got up and walked out of the house during the night when the parents were asleep, there literally were monsters out there to eat the child. So that's, a lot of the things that we have to teach children, like that simple thing to make them stay in bed at night, was originally a survival tool and really still is now. I mean, it's just different type of predators out there now, but most fear-based training is just survival-based, to stay in the human game as long as possible, but it has that downside of causing suffering.
So is it a matter of degree? I mean, would it be healthier to teach the child that wants to sniff the flowers that there might also be wolves there, or teach the child that's concerned about the wolves that there are also flowers to be sniffed? Is there somewhere in between the two?
I would say
We?
yes, it's a matter of
Yes,
degree, just like you say.
yeah.
And to the degree that you taught one the one thing and the other thing, would it would depend on what situation appeared in experience as to whether
Mm.
that teaching would have been a positive teaching that aided survival or hindered survival. So in a way, there's no real standard pattern. It's teaching fear has to be, in a way, situational to the environment that they're going to be raised in, which makes
Yeah.
it even more
Okay. So
difficult.
so that brings me to the point then that a lot of the fear that we teach the young kids is is not proportional to the actual danger. Right? So the mother that's concerned about her baby getting hurt is going to respond with 100% of concern that the baby will get hurt. It's not going to say, there's a good chance it won't get hurt. It's going to respond to the slightest chance that it will get hurt and make a really big deal out of it. And so we end up with these kids that learn to be afraid of everything, afraid of their own shadow, I think is a common term.
Probably. Yeah.
So is it then contingent on us as parents to consider the extent to which we teach a child about danger?
Yeah. It's just fear is such a good motivator. I mean, governments use it, and it's the go-to for raising children. It's the quick solution.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
balanced solution would probably take more time and reasoning and stuff. So wanting a quick solution, fear is always the easy go-to, I think.
Yeah, well, it probably also indicates that we don't know as adults, we've forgotten how to communicate with a young child, but fear works.
True. Probably true.
I promised myself as a kid that I would never treat my kids, the ones that I didn't have at the time, I would never treat them the way my father treated me. Um, and so I didn't belt them on more than a couple of occasions, but essentially, no, I didn't do that. But I yelled at them a lot. So I still tried to intimidate them the way my father did. These days, that would be considered tangible abuse, the way I yelled at them with my the full extent of my anger or whatever. And I was just trying to control them. I mean, they were uncontrollable little shits. They wanted to do what they wanted to do, not what I wanted them to do. I wanted them to go to bed and they wanted to keep playing. They were not cooperative. I had no option but to use force to try and control them. I don't know what parents do these days. God help them. They can't belt them. They can't yell at them. They can't. What do they do? How do they control their kids? And the kids need controlling, otherwise they'll hurt themselves, won't they? Or each other, or the environment. I don't know. I don't know.
In my opinion, they end up behaving badly and possibly then in jail later on. I mean, I can look around and see the ones that the young ones that have the fear of the Lord in them around here in the Bible Belt. They behave, and the ones
Yes.
that don't are generally misbehaving. And I'm not raising the flag over religion in particular, but it does serve that purpose of an organized fear system that seems to work for groups.
Mm.
But yeah, they're they've gotten I agree they've gotten too lax with. I have friends in school, teachers that just say it's just pretty much out of control in a lot of places. Babysitters. Anyway, going too far down the rabbit hole. The point
Mm.
is, a lot of what Liberation Unleashed has to look at is fear that's been implanted in people.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
and yeah, it has to be seen through or reversed, and it's a powerful emotion. Doesn't surprise me so many people walk away from it.
Mm. Yeah. It's very fundamental to our contemporary lifestyle, isn't it? Mm.
How's the group going over at POK? The
Uh,
the your meeting.
I think two people turned up last time. It was a good meeting, but yeah, not getting much traction.
Well, the good thing about less is you can work on any one person more.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. It's good in that way.
Like you said a while ago, just wake one up. That might be the one that changes the world.
Mm. Been getting any sleep, Andre?
Not really, no. Um, but I guess that comes with the territory, right? They don't tell you when you have sex. They don't tell you what's going to happen. Um, and I do kind of realize, and I find it absolutely fascinating in a way um, that mm, that the knowledge base about pregnancy, pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, and post, whatever they call it, partum or post-pregnancy. There's no, I mean, like you have to do so much research to get to get a full picture of what you need to do, what you have to do, what you need to buy, what you don't need to buy, which is like what stuff is essential, what stuff you don't need at all. And it like we're talking to friends, we don't have many, but we're talking to friends and we're getting sort of information from them. But there's not one single sort of source of information where you just go to and they tell you, okay, this is what you do, and then after that, this is what you do, and it's funny because there's a lot, like there's really a lot of information out there, but it doesn't seem to it seemed to be a little defragmented, I guess, in a way, and I don't know why, because people have been giving birth for like so many years,
Forever.
and
Yeah.
yeah, forever, and maybe there have been traditions where with midwives and natives, like native tribes, and they would have certain ceremonies around that, and then that's how they would pass on the information and knowledge and support and all that. But now because we become so separated and individualized that we basically have to reinvent the wheel every time, a baby is born. Um, and I was listening to a group today, and I was looking at Paul, and I was like, oh, Paul is here, because I had an impression that usually when I come to the group, Paul is sort of gone. His camera is off, and I was like, oh, now he's there. And then the moment I started talking, he's off. Yeah, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting one. Mm. I actually thought about asking Paul uh, to send me to the land of non-duality today. Well, not today. I had this fantasy that he would ask me the questions and do a quick inquiry with me, and then my thoughts will be gone. Um, but now he's not here. I don't have that. I probably won't ask him. But also with the baby, it's kind of hard. I used to be. I used to look into baby's eyes, and I used to see sort of cosmos, space, and I would get really high, and now I'm looking at my baby, and he's just a baby. I mean, there used to be when he was born, it was like this. I was very um I was very inspired, and I kind of had this expansion, but now it's just a baby. It's just poop. It's very mundane. It doesn't really. I don't find it disappointing. I'm just like, okay. It became way less esoteric, way less lofty, um, way less celestial, more sort of earthy. And uh, and I kind of miss. I don't know. In a way, I miss my intent to sort of wake up, but I um, focus on. Well, I don't really focus. It's just I'm sort of the mind is stuck on the daily and stuff like survival. And I do struggle with the way I talk to the baby, because I want to say something and then I realize, well, I don't really want to say it because it's not true. But then like if I don't say it, then what do I say? I'll just smile at him and not say anything at all. So we just sit there smiling. I mean, he's smiling because that's the only stuff he can do, and I'm smiling because whatever I say is just bullshit. It's just like, do I call him by his name? Do I give him a label? Do I call him a boy? Do I call him, I mean, it's just there's so much there's the feelings or emotions that I want to convey are probably being conveyed anyway. So I just feel like I really need a different kind of vocabulary or dictionary to talk to him, and I don't have one. I only have what, the kind of dictionaries or vocabularies that my parents gave me or the society gave me, and so I guess I'll just have to figure it out as I uh, as I go, what to how to address him, um, how to contain his states, emotions, feelings, whatever he's going through, experiences, and hopefully I will not divert him from the truth too much. um, which I mean I'm diverted myself from anyway, but I just want to have as little interference with the way that his perception is being formed right now as possible, I guess. And I don't think I'm not sure about fear so much. Like you guys were talking about fear and how fear is a strong thing. And I think it is for survival. It is. Probably too early for me to talk about that because he's still it's just what, 1 week. So there's, it's just, it's just I'm hungry or I pooped or whatever. So I don't know. And I find it hard to, I think I became dumber in a way. I find it hard to talk about intellectual stuff, to conceptualize and to generalize and to be smart. I just more like
Yeah.
I'm more into feeling and serving, I guess. And but sometimes I get very pissed off with him, like
Mm.
super angry for like really brief time, brief moment. Yeah, but I talk to people. Everybody does that, um, and then it's just I I don't know. It's just the idea is not to hurt him or destroy him or anything.
Mm.
It's just to run to another room and just, hit the wall or something, or just breathe and come back and okay, yeah, let's do it again. Yeah, because I have that kind of way to regulate. He doesn't have it yet, but I do. So
Mm.
I'm the one who is an adult right now, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, well, big discoveries. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking, what if I was actually thinking, I had a thought today. I was listening to you guys talking, and I thought today, well, seeing through stuff will probably not help me. It will probably be a hindrance for me. Like not having thoughts, not, like this whole awakening thing is it's probably one of those expectations that you talk about, but there's an expectation that this is not, even though I am sort of seeking, this is not, this will not be of use or this will not be helpful, whatever it is there, because I need to function. And there's also an expectation that I won't be able to function in the same way, which will be okay for me because I won't really care, but probably not so much for people who depend on me. That's I just caught myself having this kind of belief or expectation.
So, any idea where that one came from?
Um, it's also, I think mm, I think it came from, it is linked to, it's like a distorted anger of not being able of me not being able to awaken or to get that, to achieve that. And because I cannot achieve that, I'll probably find flaws in it and or ideas, and I'll just it's like, oh, I never really wanted it, like, even though
Yeah,
you never had it. It's like deprecating it, I guess, in a way.
yeah, yeah. And so the idea of not getting it preserves the view that you'll be able to continue functioning.
Yeah, because I have commitments
Mm.
and
So
liabilities and
even though we talk about unlearning, we're unlearning a lot of stuff we've been taught. How logical is it that you will so totally forget how to operate in the world that you won't be able to function?
well, because my idea, if I totally unlearn everything, then I'll be just blank. I'll be tabula rasa.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'll be just what the body and reflexes.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
You put a finger into my mouth and I start sucking it. That's it. Just reflexes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. That's totally unrealistic, of course. Um, the reality is that we're not actually unlearning that way of looking at things. We're undoing the compulsion to be obedient to them.
Mm.
That's a much more accurate way, as I see it, about that stuff. So,
Mm.
although you will no longer be a prisoner, you will be liberated from the social necessities. You will still use them when it's appropriate, and you won't forget how to use them. So, functioning will continue, probably in a better way, because it won't be constantly interfered with by being defensive.
Hmm. Mm. Well, I guess I'm thinking because I heard the story about this guy who was in Osho's ashram or something in India, and he allegedly um, got the samadhi or whatever, awaken, or I don't know what happened to him. And he was so full of love. So he took whatever, and he took all of his clothes and he ran outside the ashram. And locals just killed him with stones or something like that. I don't know if it's a real story. But it kind of, what happens to me sometimes when I become emotional, and I can see that something is taking over me. Like when I listen to the music or when I watch the nature, there's that really, really strong. I think it started to happen when the brain started to sort of loosen the grip. That I just go into this sort of baby mode, I guess, in a
Yeah,
way.
yep, 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 yep. And you can
And
extrapolate from that to being unable to
yeah,
function. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that whatever happens at the other end of this bridge or rainbow is going to do the same to me. I'll just I'll be well. It won't be the concern then. It's a concern now that it will take over me completely.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
so, but I mean, when I say this, I see how false this. Well, not false. How
Yeah, yeah. How it's
insubstantial this is.
incomplete. Yeah.
Incomplete because it's just when I said it first, it made sense. Now I'm saying this, and it's just words. It doesn't make any sense.
Mm.
I mean, it happens, whatever.
Yep, yep.
And I'm.
That's how we discover things. Yeah.
Mm,
So if I'm walking along the road and an example I use because for some reason that same pothole has been there in the road just down the bottom of the hill from my house that same pothole has been there for as long as I can remember. And every time I see that pothole, I get blown away by what I see. What I don't know what I get blown away by, but I do. There's a sense of awe comes up every time I see that pothole, and how it's changed from last time I saw it. So there's memory involved and so on. And there is a genuine sense, experience of wonder and awe when I look at that. But my wife's walking beside me, and I'm leading the dog on a lead, and they've got no idea that happened to me. And I'm not saying it out loud. Oh wow, look at that. I might have the first time it happened, but essentially I don't. So they don't even know it's going on. And if she were to talk me in the middle of that happening, my attention would be diverted from one to the other. So there's no non-functioning aspect to that, to the experience of the magic of what is here, if we relate to it beyond the level of language. It's additional to, not instead of the other stuff. If the other stuff is appropriate, then it will be there and be fine. So your fear of not being able to function is just a good excuse. It's not literally an issue. It is literally an issue because it's an issue, but the reason for it is not legitimate. You're not going to stop being able to function. You'll be functioning better, not the other way around. So it's quite clear to me that you're hanging on to that as an excuse to not wake up is just an excuse. It's you being defensive. And none of that is wrong. Don't take me the wrong way. I mean, I'm not being critical about that. I'm just pointing out that that is something that I'm imagining is the issue for you. It's just a damn good excuse.
It is, yeah. Now when you were talking about the porthole, I kind of felt this. Do you explain it? As like sort of calmness and lightness, and there's nothing to do, and then it just something comes on when I think about awakening, or when I think about this experience, and it starts, and it's every time it's a different story. Now this was the story about non-functioning, and I'm sure there's like a bunch of stories there that I'll be throwing out every time. But the one that I kind of felt underneath it was this loyalty to, well, not loyalty. What kind of loyalty? I'm loyal to suffering in a way. Like I want to keep my suffering. Yeah, or at least someone wants to keep their suffering. That gives me something which I don't fully understand what. Something very important, I guess, tangible in a way. Yeah, maybe it is my way of feeling part of this world, because I also have these traits and features that this world has, I guess. I don't know. It's just I'm just rambling on.
I get it. Yeah, I think you're just rambling on because you really, really want to ask Paul something, and you're just afraid of that.
Oh yeah, Paul. When you were not here, because when we had a brief interaction with you some time ago, and I remember you asked me a series of questions, and at the end of these questions, I saw that there was nothing to defend, and because I was angry with you when you started talking to me, and then by the end, you were done, or I was done, or whatever was done. I thought, Oh, right. I actually saw that there was nothing to defend, but then I kept coming back to that moment, and I kept thinking that you were what's the word? You were like almost merciless. You were uh, incompassionate. The word, I guess, or something like that. You were like, you were,
You're a
yeah,
heartless bastard.
yeah, you were a heartless bastard, but not bastard. They're just heartless. That's how I was like, because Paul is heartless. And then I had this whole story about because you're only focused on. It's almost like you're a scientist who's interested in science but not interested in the heart. And I wanted the heart, and that's how I explained to myself that I was angry with you because I thought you didn't have a heart for me. Well, that's how I imagined it at the moment. And then I had this fantasy that I want to ask you to help me get more of that in my life, of what I had with you that back then, um, of that kind of thoughtless space, where there were no thoughts, and I was still there. I was functioning, but there were no thoughts, and become emotional. And I don't know why, but that maybe it has nothing to do with that. Anyway, mm, yeah.
I think I know where you're pointing here, and I know the answer to it. When when I or any guide do more of a direct experience inquiry, it's not heartless in a way, it's heartful because it's trying to break through a deeply held belief, but it feels to the person that I'm directing this to like a personal attack. Whenever a
Hmm.
strongly held belief is challenged, it feels like a personal attack, but it's not. The effort to break through and have a person see that it's just a belief, that's just part and parcel of the process. And the way you react is normal because whatever it was I was challenging at the time, I don't have remember the particulars of it. Whatever I was challenging at the time was a very deeply ingrained, closely held belief that you identify as me, as a part of me. And if I take that part away from you, it's a threat to you, a perceived threat to you, when in fact it's not, because there is no you to be threatened. That's the whole point. And when you see that the belief was hollow, that there was no reason to be defensive, that's what I consider progress. Because you see that it had no value to hold that belief, that it wasn't a part of you. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yes, yes. But I'm. Why does it? Why is there like a almost a sort of residual? Why is there like a left? Why is it not a one-off project? Like, because whatever came back defending that. So in the moment with you, I remember that it was like, oh, there's nothing to defend, and I was just and I became silent. I remember that, but then it sort of kept crawling back. This. Oh, but Paul is not really, he's not, well, it sort of, the words that came back were, started to explain to me, how I felt and that anger, whatever. So it wasn't gone completely. I did feel it was in a way, but then after some time, it just came back. And,
Well, strongly held beliefs are a habit in a way. You may have a breakthrough moment and then it may come back. It's a question in a way of whittling it down because this strongly held belief was built up repeatedly over time, and then you don't let go of them easily. The reason it seems heartless or merciless or direct is because when you start doing an inquiry on something, on a deeply held belief, that they start putting the defense mechanisms up, the diversions, and you have to say, no, you can't go there. Look at this.
Mm,
No, you're distracting yourself. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this.
mm,
And every time I try to sweep away your defense, it's your defense, and you take it personally as a part of you, and you feel threatened again. So it's
mm,
natural for you to feel threatened, but I felt like it doesn't come from me as I am threatening you anyway. I'm pushing you.
mm.
But the very fact that you can say at some point, there was no reason, there was nothing for you to defend, shows that something got through.
Yeah. And part of me kind of strangely liked it, and I wanted more of it.
Well, it's a relief
But
to be rid of strongly held beliefs. They're like a constriction.
yeah,
It can be very freeing to see through a strongly held belief, which is why most people, when they experience the shift, whatever you want to call that, one of the first things they say is freeing. It's light. It's fresh.
yeah,
It's open. But many of them also say 3 days later, 7 days later, 10 days later, they come into aftercare and say, "Oh, I had it, but I lost it. I'm back to feeling the old anger or the anxiety or this, that, or the other because strongly held beliefs were built up over time, and sometimes it takes time to get through them. You chip away at it one chip at a time.
so in order to get to that, let's say, I don't know, place or state or experience, is there, I take it every moment has a doorway, right? Basically, to that. Is there, like, what could I do on to get to sort of mm, make it more
Stop.
uh,
You're presupposing there's a door. There is none. You are it already. You just whatever you are, whatever you want to define yourself as, also contains a false belief of a me, but you can't get what you already are. You already are what you seek, but within this, there is a false belief. But the false belief doesn't limit what you are. You are it right this moment. You are awake. You are awake to at least the idea that there is a false self. You will be just the same awakeness when the false self is seen through. There is no door because there's nowhere to go.
And extend that a little bit, and you've got this really tricky situation where there's not any nowhere to go, there's nowhere to be. And so when you see something and you experience something, and then it appears that you've lost it, you haven't lost it. It's not possible to lose it, right? When it happened, you became a different person. What you're experiencing now that appears to be the old stuff coming back is a new version of the old stuff. It's not the old stuff. So what can happen is that the belief that is a foundation for a whole lot of experiencing can go, and yet we can experience what we used to experience when the belief was in place. And so if we immediately say, oh, it's undone and the old belief is back, that actually creates a new version of the old belief. And we're locked into that. But the reality isn't that the old belief came back at all. It's that we just behaved as if it was still there because of the habitual nature of that behaving. And if we recognize that, then each time that turns up, simply seeing it is enough to change it, for it to dissipate again. But if we think we've lost it, we feel like we have to go back around the whole routine again. So you'll frequently get people constantly going back to the fridge to see if the watermelon's in there when they know there's not, when they know it's not. They'll constantly go back looking for a self in order to reaffirm the fact that there's no self there. When they know there's not, they know what they're going to find, but they still do it because they think it's something that's lost rather than the reality, as I see it, that they've just got a habitual reflection of something going on. It's not that the old stuff is back. It's just that remnant of the remainder of the habit that's there.
It is a good point that I just heard. Well, I heard you say. I don't know if you that and I also I think I have it in a way that there's no way to resume uh, sort of to to pick up where you left off. It's for me. It's almost like you keep hearing about fetter one, so I think of because I'm not sure about whether or not there's no self. Like 100% of the time, I have to go back to fetter one. And after it's done, after I've seen through this, I can basically do step two, step three, like as if it's a linear process. And now you're saying that it's not a linear process. It's kind of it's it's a nice reminder to me that I shouldn't look at it as a linear process. It's almost like it's a start and there's a start and there's a finish, right? But
Mm,
if I'm like halfway through, I still like nah, because I'm not sure I did it right. So I'll just go
mm,
back to the
mm,
the start again, and I'll start running this marathon again. Uh, Having discarded, well, not fully discarded, but like I'll just throw away whatever I have and go back to the from and just go from scratch. And then something that Paul said, I could just when Paul was saying this, I could just feel that my body was. Mm, it's almost like my body and my mind were having two different um two sort of experiencing patterns or something. It's like the body was doing its thing. Well, if I could say doing, and then the mind was almost like um there was no harmony between basically body and the mind. And the body is like, oh, that's interesting. That's uh, oh, like let's have more. Let's whatever is happening. I'm like, ooh, let's explore that. Let's go into that. And the mind is like, well, I don't really think it's a thing. It's unless you like understand it, unless you la 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 la. So and it felt like I am kind of doomed to not be able mm, to have these two sort of marry each other in a way, be friends. Like, oh, you're important just as much as I'm important, and and I'll pay attention to what's happening to you, and like you will pay attention to what's happening to me, and it's more like bodies like there's almost a belief inside that says that, oh, body is authentic, but the mind is not.
Mm.
And I sort of discard the mind with that thought, but the mind is in a way stronger because whatever body is having, the mind has the power to, or at least I have vested the power for the mind to discard all that experience and just say, well, it's just whatever, you just felt what? Tension in your legs? That's nothing. It's not a breakthrough.
So it's true, and when you were talking there, I got that image again of the spiral, and so when we're on the ground level of the spiral, and we're doing that first loop around, it's convenient and a good technique to say all your thoughts are shit. They're just going to get in the road. Every single one of them is a problem. But once we've done that full 360 at the ground level, we're up into the next level and we're going around again. Then thoughts become useful again. We have a different relationship to thoughts at that point. And you're kind of almost you're in the middle of those two levels, you know. And of course, the spiral is a constant elevation as you go around. So you're not, you know, there's no kind of clear point where you're at one level and then you're at the next level. But essentially, yeah, you're moving. To me, it's obvious that you're starting to lift up off the ground at that level where thoughts can become useful again. But there's still a whole lot of rubbish thoughts that you'd say you still haven't worked out what are good thoughts and what are not yet, essentially. So it's still, just for the moment, appropriate to say all of your thoughts are shit. None of them are going to be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, of course, they're all involved. You'll still think and that's how you'll get to have bodily shifts. That's how beliefs will change and so on. It'll all be involved with thought. But essentially, to get lost in any thought train at the moment is just a diversion. When thoughts become useful, you won't get lost in them either.
So what should I do?
Nothing you can do.
Okay. But I have this idea that if I turn my thoughts off completely, well,
As
That
if you
won't
could.
happen.
I'm just saying this. I cannot turn them off. It's just like if I find a way to just see them as clouds in the sky, um, and not sort of grab onto any of them, then I'll be free in a way, I guess. But I don't know how to do that because I either have thoughts, as in I can hear them distinctly or indistinctly in my mind or in my body, or there are no thoughts. And neither seems to be, I'm not happy with either of the states.
Mm.
You're doing it right now. The very fact that you can recognize thoughts as not having any value is seeing that thoughts have no value. You're overlooking the obvious.
Uh, but oh yeah. But what happens if the thought, with some thoughts, it is that, well, sort of that easy to discard them.
Some thoughts
But
have strong emotions attached to them.
uh, but some thoughts are not like discernible. Some thoughts are like you can see it clearly, almost as if it were an object, and some thoughts are just sort of melted and into the fabric of whatever, and it's just I cannot see the shape of the thought or the borders of the thought, where it starts and where it ends, and it almost feels like it's just part of the experience, like it's not a standalone thing, it's in every cell, and it cannot be not diluted. It cannot be discerned, like the singled out and then disregarded.
Okay, you're
It
putting
is just part
it.
of it.
Yeah.
It is just part of experience. If you want to call it an undiscernible thought, okay, there's an undiscernible thought part of experience. It comes and goes. And then a discernible thought, which is part of experience. There's no weight to either one.
Mm.
Go ahead, Vince. I interrupted you.
That's fine. Yeah, I was going to say that your focus is very sharply on the nature of thoughts. I would like to shift your focus to not be on the nature of the thought, but rather on your relationship to the thought. Right? So it's got nothing to do with what the thought's about. It all got to do with how you feel about that thought. What is your relationship with it? So some of your thoughts you'll hang on to very strongly. Some thoughts you'll allow them just to float past with hardly any attention. Right? Engagement is another word that comes to mind with thoughts. How much engagement is happening with this thought or that thought? Right? So it's never about the thought itself. It's not about what the thought is. It's about
Mm.
your relationship to the thought that we're talking about.
Right. And you gave your own example a while ago. When I challenged the core self, you reacted strong emotionally with anger. Now, if I said
Mm.
the wall behind you is white, there's no strong emotional reaction to that. So your reality, neither thought is more or less true. It's your reaction to the particular thought that makes it more real or more important to you. So the question is, does that strong emotion prove the truth of any thought? If I say there is no separate you, does that strong emotion that wells up in you prove that there is? Or is it just an emotion, a feeling? It's not the thought, it's the reaction, what Vince just told you, that makes it more real, that makes it you. That's my thought because I feel strongly about that thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that's how that's how I sort of self-preserve. Um, if I let go of all of these thoughts slash thoughts, emotions, uh, I don't really have right now from this point, I don't have a way to see what how to identify how to uh,
You just said it.
well describe myself basically.
You know, what were you going to say before? You stopped yourself from saying, I won't know how to identify.
That's it.
Yeah, I won't know how to be this or Andre to
Mm.
because every response that I have to a memory to a thought is mine and it is strong and and that's how I know that this is like it's it's just mine. It's
Mine is a feeling.
yeah, yeah.
It's a label for a
It is
feeling.
it is a feeling, and it is almost like it's a childish kind of well, not child. It's
I was going to say it's a chocolate feeling.
a chocolate feeling. Oh, I th
Mine is a reassuring feeling. That's what he's saying. But look at the word,
yes.
look at the label mine. Can it actually own anything? The concept mine, does it actually touch anything?
No, but it puts up a wall between you and me
That's a
and sort of
belief.
well, yes, and then protects me from you destroying.
Does mind, the concept mind, actually put up a wall?
I
Or does it invoke a feeling?
cannot answer that. It's both. It's more, I don't know. I did have a feeling. I did have a thought about the wall. But now that you asked me, I don't know. Like I'm not sure.
Isn't mind just a label for a feeling?
Yes, but it does have a sense of being defended, being protected. When I use that, it sort of almost creates a like a protective shell or bubble in a way.
So another feeling is you would have a label fear.
Hmm. Yes, I there's a fear that if there's nothing that I can call mine, then there's no, well, there's no me, right?
Right.
And then who am I?
Is that based on the idea that you have to be somebody? What if
I
the
see.
answer to who am I is
It's the
nobody?
answer to that is survival. If I'm
Right.
nobody, I cannot survive. That's the
Mm.
belief. If I
You're
am
nobody now and you
somebody,
survived. You're nobody now and you've survived.
Have you survived because of the illusion that you are somebody? Is that what's kept you alive?
mhm.
Or would you
um,
still be alive anyway?
I don't know why I survived, but I see that in order to survive, I need to be somebody. But I cannot say with certainty that I survived because I am somebody. I think I survived because I don't know. There's no answer. It just
So here's something, the question I wanted to ask you, go back is 30 seconds or so. The strength of the mine, this is mine, how strongly that is felt. Can you see that's directly proportional with the size and strength of the wall? If it's a really important mine, then it's a big, strong wall. If it's a really lightly held mine, it's just a fence.
but it's only there to it's not like it doesn't have to be solid. It's just there to no it became smaller now that we're talking about it and it's
So at one point, does it stop becoming defensive and just starting to be differentiating?
Well, it's kind of it's kind of mind defensive slash protective, but less aggressive right now. But it's not. I think. Well, yeah. I guess it's important to see where me ends and another starts, I guess. So that's a way to draw like a line. Otherwise, how do I find myself if there are no
Mm.
um physical, well, if there are no boundaries?
Yep. Yeah. So we have this image that goes from a big, strong wall at a bit of a distance away from us, but really big and strong and like a fortress. And then that can shrink down and come closer to eventually just being nothing more than a picket fence that's a lot closer in. It's not such a defensive thing, but it just differentiates between what's mine and what's not mine.
It becomes bigger if it needs to protect, but
Yes.
if it doesn't need to protect, then yeah, that's the way it stays. It's just
Yeah, yeah.
it's almost like an inflated and deflated state. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if it gets bigger and needs to deflect, does it get further out as well?
Yeah, it stretches. It sort of yeah. It it becomes more than it needs to be. It sort of
Yeah, because there's big monsters on the other side of it or whatever. Yeah.
trespass. Well, yeah. It's like animals like they become bigger to scare away other animals, even if they're small.
So if all of a sudden there was nothing to defend, let's say you cease to become a solid entity that can be killed and you become much more amorphous, you become more gas-like and even a bear that got inside the wall could run and it would run right through you and not touch you. You wouldn't be hurt at all because you're nobody. There's nothing there for the bear to hurt and there's nothing needing to be defended because
That's how I felt with the last time with Paul, that if there's nothing to defend, then there's no tension when the bear um, approaches. Nothing
hmm,
becomes tense. The bear just approaches, and then whatever happens. I mean, because there's no fear of um, disappearing or fear of death, I suppose.
yeah, it's everything's yeah. And can you remember that feeling? Does it reappear in the body now as you attempt to remember it?
Yes, but also because I'm seeing that you guys have been on for like 3 hours, and I'm a little concerned with. Well, I am not little, but I'm just concerned that you're. I don't want you to to overstay your welcome. So,
Oh, that was a not so subtle diversion, wasn't it?
well, no, but no, but I just could because I saw that this thought is is in the way when I think about that
Yeah.
what I felt. I see this thought, and the thought is like, so I cannot just relax and go into that. At least that's how I explain it
All
to
right.
myself.
Well,
I
I
mean,
don't
you
know
could
if
call
this
it a
is
diversion.
synchronicity, but I just got, as you were talking about that thought, up come on my computer a low battery warning. I've got 10% of battery left. So that's maybe synchronistic for you. But so hurry up and wake up because you've got about 3 minutes left before my computer shuts down.
So answer a
Well,
question for me.
yeah.
Is ambivalence, when I say ambivalence, What does that mean to you? Is that good? Does it have a good connotation or a bad connotation?
Ambivalence.
You're ambivalent about your
Because
answer.
yes, my answer is ambivalent as well. Because I'm thinking I cannot give you a binary answer to that. I don't know why. I would. Part of me thinks it's good. Part of me thinks it's because it's neither, it's bad. I mean, that's how I see the meaning of the word. It's neither nor.
Well, it's pretty much the absence of strong emotion. If I say the
Well,
wall is white, you are ambivalent about that thought. If you say the wall is white, you are ambivalent about that thought. Yet,
because okay.
if you say I am Andre, then there's a strong emotional content.
Yeah, there's strong emotion. Yeah.
Does the lack of a strong feeling mean the wall isn't white? Or does the presence of a strong feeling mean Andre is anything other than a label?
Mm. I'm stuck. I yeah, I don't know what came first, the egg or the hen, but I think
You
I
seem to
no
be
question that
defining yourself as a strong emotion.
yes,
Is that
that's
a
true.
self? Is a strong emotion actually Andre, a self?
Collection of strong emotions. It's well, there's a belief that it when emotion comes, that's Andre. When a strong feeling or strong experience happens, that's Andre. If there are none, then I have difficulty saying who Andre is.
Okay, so
So
is that,
again,
yeah.
the strong feeling is what you're using as proof of this self.
Hmm.
And I wonder if does that expose another belief that if you wake up, you will be dead to feeling, dead to good feelings.
I don't know. I think when the belief that if I well if when whatever um, then I will not be surprised or I will not make anything out of the emotions that I have them now because right now emotions for me is a evidence or confirmation or whatever of that I am that I exist, I'm alive. And I think after awakening, basically, it's just an emotion is just a feeling. It's not, there's no, I think I won't be turning, it won't be turned into such a big thing as it is now. I don't know. It's just an idea.
So you
Mm.
see that. You see exactly what we're pointing to right now.
Hmm. But if I drop that, because for me, authentic Andre is that strong emotion, is that strong feeling. If I drop that, then who the fuck? I mean,
So here's an interesting one, really interesting one, right? If you wake up, you think you're going to be as cold and dispassionate and lacking feeling as what I am.
Yeah, it's a.
There's a crazy contradiction, isn't there?
I don't think you're that.
No, of course you don't.
And actually,
You know, I wouldn't
no,
say I'm that either. There's nothing cold and dispassionate here. There's
no,
emotion erupting everywhere all the time. And
no.
yet
Actually,
you're saying if you wake up, you're going to be totally dispassionate.
no. I'm not going to be
But
dispassionate. I will not be. I will not have this kind of relationship to the emotion that I have.
You won't
I will still.
attach
Yeah,
as much importance to them, is what I
yeah.
heard.
Yes, yes.
And you see that right now. You
I
see
do,
right
but
now that attaching importance to emotions as proof of yourself is kind of hollow, proof of nothing.
I I see that. I see I see the first part, the attachment, but I don't see the whole, the next part. Not so much. I still.
You do see it, but there's a non-acceptance of it.
There's fear, actually. There's fear that
Right.
I'll fall if I let it go, right? I'm holding on to
Does
that
that
now.
fear prove that it isn't true?
Uh, I need to try and understand that question. Can you say it again? Does that?
You said if you let go that there won't be any of you and that there's fear. Does
Mhm.
fear prove anything at all other than just a feeling?
Yeah, nothing. Just a feeling. Just- Because fear itself is also a strong emotion.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess Vince is right. If there are no emotions, it means I'm dead. Well, it's just a belief.
You can't
I'll be
stop
like,
emotions. Yes, you already said it, though. You'll attach less importance to them, which you are already doing.
mm-hmm,
The very seeing that you attach emotions, more importance to emotions than they merit, is already attaching less to them.
mm-hmm,
The very act of noticing is it.
mm-hmm. Mm, yeah, I'll 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 check it out. I'll keep this in. I'll keep watching, I guess.
Yep.
Thank you,
Just
guys.
play with it. Play with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Vince.
Cool.
I'm not afraid of you, Paul, as much anymore as I used to be. Oh,
Good.
yeah.
Notice he said as much.
Well, still.
I have that effect on a lot of people.
Oh, you big scary thing, you.
Yeah, yeah, that's the perception.
Yeah.
It's a perception that many people have.
All right,
There's a
everybody. Yeah.
there's a there's a there's a there's a there's a place for every different type of guiding, and pushing hard, hard, hard is my
Yeah.
way, and it works for some and not for others. So
Yeah. Well,
it
that's a
is what
good
it
thing
is,
about these meetings, and we can have a lot of different perspectives, and even from non-guides, we can have good stuff come. Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers,
Hey,
fellas.
bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.